As the story goes, the legendary marksman William Tell was forced into a cruel challenge by a corrupt lord. William's son was to be executed unless William could shoot an apple off his head. William succeeded, but let's imagine two variations on the tale. In the first variation, the Lord hires a bandit to steal William's trusty crossbow, so he is forced to borrow an inferior one from a peasant. However, the borrowed crossbow isn't adjusted perfectly, and William finds that his practice shots cluster in a tight spread beneath the bullseye. Fortunately, he has time to correct for it before it's too late. Variation 2. William begins to doubt his skills in the long hours before the challenge, and his hand develops a tremor. His practice shots still cluster around the apple, but in a random pattern. Occasionally, he hits the apple, but with the wobble, there is no guarantee of a bullseye. He must settle his nervous hand and restore the certainty in his aim to save his son. At the heart of these variations are two terms often used interchangeably: accuracy and precision. The distinction between the two is actually critical for many scientific endeavors. Accuracy involves how close you come to the correct result. Your accuracy improves with tools that are calibrated correctly and that you're well trained on. Precision, on the other hand, is how consistently you can get that result using the same method. Your precision improves with more finely incremented tools that require less estimation. The story of the crossbow was one of precision. Really got the same result each time he fired. The variation of shaky was one of the values. William's bones clustered around the correct result, but without certainty. You can probably get away with low accuracy or low precision in everyday tasks, but engineers and artists often on microscopic levels with a high certainty every time. That means at last, is precision. So managers must decide what the acceptable uncertainty of the project is. However, investments in precision is beyond what was previously possible. It may surprise you that NASA predicting where they will land requires extensive calculations, fed by measurements that don't always follow. How does the Martian atmosphere density change at different elevations? What will be the code hit the atmosphere? What will be the size? Simulators run thousands of different elements, weighing all the possibilities. The computer spits out the potential in the form of a landing ellipse. In 1976, the landing ellipse for the Mars Viking lander was 62 by 174 miles, nearly the area of New Jersey. With such a limitation, NASA had to ignore many interesting but risky landing areas. Since then, new information about the Martian atmosphere, improved spacecraft technology, and more powerful computer simulations have drastically reduced uncertainty. In 2012, the landing ellipse was an This allowed NASA to target a specific spot of high scientific use. While we ultimately strive for accuracy, precision reflects our certainty of for the stars, and be confident every time. In 1967, researchers from around the world gathered to answer a a long-running scientific question. Just how long is a second? It might seem obvious at first. A second is the tick of a clock, the time it takes to count to one. But how precise are those measurements? What is that figure based on? And how can we scientifically define this fundamental unit of time? For most of human history, ancient civilizations measured time with unique calendars that tracked the steady march of the night sky. In fact, the second as we know it wasn't introduced until the late 1500s, when the Gregorian calendar began to spread across the globe alongside British colonialism. The Gregorian calendar defined a day as a single revolution of the Earth about its axis. Each day could be divided into 24 hours, each hour into 60 minutes, and each minute into 60 seconds. However, when it was first defined, the second was more of a mathematical idea than a useful unit of time. Measuring days and hours was sufficient for most tasks in pastoral communities. It wasn't until society became interconnected through fast-moving railways that cities needed to agree on exact timekeeping. By the 1950s, numerous global systems required every second to be perfectly accounted for, with as much precision as possible. And what could be more precise than the atomic scale? As early as 1955, researchers began to develop atomic clocks, which relied on the unchanging laws of physics to establish a new foundation for timekeeping. An atom consists of negatively charged electrons orbiting in positive at a consistent frequency. The laws of quantum mechanics you can slightly disturb the electrons takes easier to measure. Researchers this process doesn't atomic clocks for measuring time. And since every atom of a given elemental isotope should produce perfectly consistent clocks. But before things could go fully atomic, countries had to decide which atom would work best. This was the discussion in 1967 at the 13th General Conference of the International Committee for Weights and Measures. There are 118 elements on the periodic table, each with their own unique properties. For this task, the researchers were looking for several things. The element needed to have long-lived high-frequency electron oscillation with precise, long-term timekeeping. To easily track this oscillation, it also needed to have a reliably measurable quantum state, meaning the orientation of the axis about which the electron rotates, as well as a simple energy level structure, meaning the active electrons are few and their state is simple to identify. Finally, it needed to be easy to vaporize. The winning atom, cesium-133. Cesium was already a popular element for atomic clock research, and by 1968, some cesium clocks were even commercially available. All that was left was to determine how many ticks of a cesium atom were in a second. The conference used the most precise astronomical measurement of a second available at the time, beginning with the number of days in a year and dividing down. When compared to the atom's ticking rate, the results formally defined 1 second as exactly 9,192,631,770 ticks of a cesium-133 atom. Today, atomic clocks are used all over the Earth and beyond it. From radio signal transmitters to satellites for global positioning systems, these devices have been synchronized to help us maintain a globally consistent time, with precision that's second to none. Even with the help of these absurdly accurate clocks, it can be difficult to make the most of your time. We get interrupted, overwhelmed, or try to do too much all at once. So is there any way we can get better at managing our time? Check out this video to see what strategies we can learn from computers. In 2013, a team of researchers held a math test. The exam was administered to over 1,100 American adults and designed, in part, to test their ability to evaluate sets of data. Hidden among these math problems were two almost identical questions. Both problems used the same difficult data set, and each had one objectively correct answer. The first asked about the correlation between rashes and a new skin cream. The second asked about the correlation between crime rates and gun control legislation. Participants with strong math skills were much more likely to get the first question correct. But despite being mathematically identical, the results for the second question looked totally different. Here, math skills weren't the best predictor of which participants answered correctly. Instead, another variable the researchers had been tracking came into play: political identity. Participants whose political beliefs aligned with a correct interpretation of the data were far more likely to answer the problem right. Even the study's top mathematicians were 45% more likely to get the second question wrong when the correct answer challenged their political beliefs. What is it about politics that inspires this kind of illogical error? Can someone's political identity actually affect their ability to process information? The answer lies in a cognitive phenomenon that has become increasingly visible in public life: partisanship. While it's often invoked in the context of politics, partisanship is more broadly defined as a strong preference or bias towards any particular group or idea. Our political, ethnic, religious, and national identities are all different forms of partisanship. Of course, identifying with social groups is an essential and healthy part of human life. Our sense of self is defined not only by who we are as individuals, but also by the groups we belong to. As a result, we're strongly motivated to defend our group identities, protecting both our sense of self and our social communities. But this becomes a problem when the group's beliefs are at odds with reality. Imagine watching your favorite sports team commit a serious foul. You know that's against the rules, but your fellow fans think it's totally acceptable. The tension between these two incompatible thoughts is called cognitive dissonance, and most people are driven to resolve this uncomfortable state of limbo. You might start to blame the referee, complain that the other team started it, or even convince yourself there was no foul in the first place. In a case like this, people are often more motivated to maintain a positive relationship with their group than perceive the world accurately. This behavior is especially dangerous in politics. On an individual scale, allegiance to a party allows people to create a political identity and support policies they agree with. But partisan-based cognitive dissonance can lead people to reject evidence that's inconsistent with the party line or discredits party leaders. And when entire groups of people revise the facts in service of partisan beliefs, it can lead to policies that aren't grounded in truth or reason. This problem isn't new. Political identities have been around for centuries, but but studies show that partisan polarization has increased dramatically in the last few decades. One theory explaining this increase is the trend towards clustering geographically in like-minded communities. Another is the growing tendency to rely on partisan news or social media bubbles. These often add to echo chambers, delivering news and ideas from people with similar views. Fortunately, cognitive scientists have uncovered some strategies for resisting this distortion filter. One is to remember that you're probably more biased than you think. So when you encounter new information, make a deliberate effort to push through your initial intuition and evaluate it analytically. In your own groups, try to make fact-checking and questioning assumptions a valued part of the culture. Warning people that they might have been presented with misinformation can also help. And when you're trying to persuade someone else, affirming their values and framing the issue in their language can help make people more receptive. We still have a long way to go before solving the problem of partisanship, but hopefully these tools can help keep us better informed and capable of making evidence-based decisions about our shared reality. An important tool in fighting echo chambers is learning how to analyze and dissect what you see on the internet and on social media. How good are you at separating fact from fiction? Test your skills with these videos. Imagine we want to build a new spaceport at one of 4 recently settled Martian bases and are holding a vote to determine its location. Of the 100 colonists on Mars, 42 live on West Base, 26 on North Base, 15 on South Base, and 17 on East Base. For our purposes, let's assume that everyone prefers the spaceport to be as close to their base as possible, and will vote accordingly. What is the fairest way to conduct that vote? The most straightforward solution would be to just let each individual cast a single ballot and choose the location with the most votes. This is known as plurality voting, or first past the post. In this case, West Base wins easily since it has more residents than any other. And yet, most colonists would consider this the worst result, given how far it is from everyone else. So, is plurality vote really the fairest method? What if we tried a system like instant runoff voting, which accounts for the full range of people's preferences rather than just their top choices? Here's how it would work. First, voters rank each of the options from 1 to 4, and we compare their top picks. South receives the fewest votes for first place, so it's eliminated. Its 15 votes get allocated to those voters' second choice, East Base, giving it a total of 32. We then compare top preferences and cut the last place option again. This time, North Base is eliminated. Its residents' second choice would have been South Base, but since that's already gone, the votes go to their third choice. That gives East 58 votes over West's 42, making it the winner. But this doesn't seem fair either. Not only did East start out in second to last place, but a majority ranked it among their 2 least preferred options. Instead of using rankings, we could try voting in multiple rounds, with the top 2 winners proceeding to a separate runoff. Normally, this would mean West and North winning the first round, and North winning the second. But the residents of East Base realize that while they don't have the votes to win, they can still skew the results in their favor. In the first round, they vote for South Base instead of their own, successfully keeping North from advancing. Thanks to this tactical voting by East Base residents, South wins the second round easily, despite being the least populated. Can a system be called fair and good if it incentivizes lying about your preferences? Maybe what we need to do is let voters express a preference in every possible head-to-head matchup. This is known as the Condorcet method. Consider one matchup, West versus North. All 100 colonists vote on their preference between the two, so that's West's 42 versus the 58 from North, South, and East, who would all prefer North. Now, do the same for the other 5 matchups. The victor will be whichever base wins the most times. Here, North wins 3 and South wins 2. These are indeed the 2 most central locations, and North has the advantage of not being anyone's least preferred choice. So, does that make the Condorcet method an ideal voting system in general? Not necessarily. Consider an election with 3 candidates. If voters prefer A over B and B over C, but prefer C over A, this method fails to select a winner. Over the decades, researchers and statisticians have come up with dozens of intricate ways of conducting and counting votes, and some have even been put into practice. But whichever one you choose, it's possible to imagine it delivering an unfair result. It turns out that our intuitive concept of fairness actually contains a number of assumptions that may contradict each other. It doesn't seem fair for some voters to have more influence than others, but nor does it seem fair to simply ignore minority preferences or encourage people to game the system. In fact, mathematical proofs have shown that for any election with more than 2 options, it's impossible to design a voting system that doesn't violate at least some theoretically desirable criteria. So while we often think of democracy as a simple matter of counting votes, it's also worth considering who benefits from the different ways of counting them. The United States' use of the Electoral College to elect presidents instead of the popular vote has become increasingly contentious in recent years. How exactly does this system work? And is it fair or antiquated? Find out here.
Mình không có ratio mình chỉ sáp thôi. Chịu thôi chứ sao vậy? Không có ratio thì the S suck that.
In 2004, a new company called Vima Nutrition started offering a life-changing opportunity to earn full-time income for part-time work. Vima's offer was open to everybody, regardless of prior experience or education. There were only 2 steps to get started earning. Purchase a $500 to $600 kit of their liquid nutrition products and recruit 2 more members to do the same. Vima Nutrition Company grew quickly, becoming a global operation that brought in 30,000 new members per month at its peak. There was just one problem. While the company generated $200 million of annual revenue by 2013, the vast majority of participants earned less than they paid in. Vima was eventually charged with operating a pyramid scheme, a common type of fraud where members make money by recruiting more people to buy in. Typically, the founder solicits an initial group of people to buy in and promote the scheme. They are then encouraged to recruit others and promised part of the money those people invest, while the founder also takes a share. The pattern repeats for each group of new participants, with money from recent arrivals funneled to those who recruited them. This differs from a Ponzi scheme, where the founders recruit new members and secretly use their fees to pay existing members, who think the payments come from a legitimate investment. As a pyramid scheme grows, it becomes increasingly difficult for new recruits to make money. That's because the number of participants expands exponentially. Take a structure where each person has to recruit 6 people to earn a profit. The founder recruits 6 people to start, and each of them recruits 6 more. There are 36 people in that second round of recruits, who then each recruit 6 people, a total of 216 new recruits. By the 12th round of recruiting, the 2.1 billion newest members would have to recruit over 13 billion more people total to make money, more than the entire world population. In this scenario, the most recent recruits, over 80% of the scheme's participants, lose all the money they paid in. And in real life, many earlier joiners lose out too. Pyramid schemes are illegal in most countries. They can be difficult to detect. They're presented as many different things. including gifting groups, investment clubs, and multi-level marketing businesses. The distinction between pyramid schemes and legitimate multi-level marketing can be particularly hazy. In theory, the difference is that the members of the multi-level marketing companies primarily earn compensation from selling a particular product or a service to retail customers, while pyramid schemes primarily compensate members for recruitment of new sellers. In practice, though, many multi-level marketing companies make it all but impossible for members to profit purely through sales. And many pyramid schemes, like BINH Nutrition, disguise themselves as legal multi-level marketing businesses, using a product or service to hide the pay and recruit structure. Many pyramid schemes also capitalize on already existing trust within churches, immigrant communities, or other tightly knit groups. The first few members are encouraged to report a good experience before they actually start making a profit. Others in their network follow their example, and the schemes balloon in size before it becomes clear that most members aren't actually profiting. Often, the victims are embarrassed into silence. Pyramid schemes entice people with the promise of opportunity and empowerment, so when members don't end up making money, they can blame themselves rather than the scheme, thinking they weren't tenacious enough to earn the returns promised. Some victims keep trying, investing in multiple schemes and losing money each time. In spite of all these factors, there are ways to spot a pyramid scheme. Time pressure is one red flag. Be wary of directives to act now or miss a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Promises of large, life-altering amounts of income are also suspect. And finally, a legitimate multi-level marketing business shouldn't require members to pay for the opportunity to sell a product or service. Pyramid schemes can be incredibly destructive to individuals, communities, and even entire countries. But you can fight fire with fire by sending this video to 3 people you know and encouraging them to do the same. While we're at it, here are a couple other things we can help you keep an eye out for.
Welcome back, everybody. It's hard to define exactly what mathematicians mean when they use the phrase problem solving. However you go about it, it's going to involve some notion of approaching puzzles that you've never seen before and still being able to systematically and creatively find some solution to them. But that's a weird thing when you think about it, because it makes it a very hard thing to teach. I mean, you can teach someone how to solve one particular problem, maybe even a class of problems, and teach them how to solve another problem. But how do you teach someone how to approach a problem that they've never seen before and still make progress on it? Well, I honestly don't know how, but what I want to do for this lecture is to talk through a couple different problem-solving principles. I've enumerated 9 of them in total, and each one we're going to walk through in the context of a specific example. And I think each one is kind of simple. You'll look at it and you'll nod along thinking, yeah, of course, that's a thing that you should do. But I would argue that each one is deceptively simple, that you would...
In March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic rocked economies worldwide. Millions of people lost their jobs, and many businesses struggled to survive or shut down completely. Governments responded with some of the largest economic relief packages in history. The United States alone spent $2.2 trillion on a first round of relief. So where did all this money come from? Most countries have a central bank that manages the money supply and is independent from the government to prevent political interference. The government can implement many types of economic policy, like decreasing people's taxes and creating jobs through public infrastructure projects, but it actually can't just increase the money supply. The central bank determines how much money is in circulation at a time. So why can't central banks authorize the printing of unlimited money to help an economy in crisis? They could, but that's a short-term solution that doesn't necessarily boost economic growth in the long term and can actually hurt the economy. Why? With more money in circulation, manufacturers of goods like food, clothing, and cars could respond to demand simply by raising prices, rather than manufacturing more of these goods and creating new jobs in the process. This would mean you could no longer buy as much with the same amount of money, a situation known as inflation. A little bit of
Mình cũng SP
inflation,
ta.
about 2% a year, is considered a sign of economic health, but more can quickly derail an economy. In recent decades, central banks have tried an approach called quantitative easing to infuse the economy with cash while maintaining a low risk of severe inflation. In this approach, a central bank increases cash flow by purchasing another entity's bonds. Anyone can buy bonds from corporations or governments. When you buy a bond, you're essentially loaning money to the company or
Dễ quá.
government with the promise that they'll pay it back later with interest. This is why buying bonds is sometimes referred to as buying debt. When an individual buys a bond, they're using money that's already in circulation. But when the central bank buys a bond, it essentially creates cash, supplying money that didn't exist before in exchange for
Ảo
bonds.
đấy để thử xem.
Both during the
Ảo đấy.
2008-2009 financial crisis and again in 2020, the United States Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, bought bonds from the U.S. government called Treasury bonds. Historically, many people have purchased these bonds as a safe form of investment, knowing the U.S. government will pay them back with interest. In early 2020, the Federal Reserve pledged to buy unlimited Treasury bonds, loaning the U.S. government an unprecedented amount of money. Cash
Thiếu
that the
đàm.
government used to
Thiếu mất
fund
cả thanh
its
kia
efforts, like stimulus checks and
Thiếu
unemployment
cả thanh kia thì
benefits.
hơi khó rồi.
This isn't equivalent to simply printing money, though it may sound similar. Because of the way bonds
Thiếu cả
are
thanh kia
priced,
cơ mà, đúng
by
đấy.
buying so many, the Federal Reserve effectively lowered the return on them, which incentivizes other investors to
135 một
lend
lượt.
to riskier entities,
Nó dùng cái
like
đấy mà
small
135.
and mid-sized companies, in order to get a decent return. Encouraging
Dead.
lending this way should help companies of all sizes borrow money to funnel into projects and hires, boosting the economy over time,
Đây là-
in
đây là
addition to helping
đã
the
cho HT
government
rồi đấy chứ.
supply people
Má.
with urgently needed cash in the short term. The Federal Reserve's pledge to buy unlimited government debt has raised some questions and eyebrows. In theory, this means the government would issue more bonds, which the central bank would purchase. The government could then use the money from the new bonds to pay off the old bonds, effectively meaning the government never pays back its debt to the central bank. Citing this and other theoretical scenarios, some economists have raised concerns that a central bank buying government debt is a subversion of a system designed to protect the
Vẫn
economy.
đét.
Others have insisted these measures are necessary and have
Xuống
so far helped stabilize
3,5 thành.
economies. Though quantitative easing has become a lot more common
Càng
in
đấy.
recent years, it's still relatively
Khạc
new,
phải khạc đến 2
and
hit đấy.
potential consequences are still unfolding. What's a dollar worth these days, anyways? Find out how the Federal Reserve determines the value of currency in this video.
Không được. Khạc thế nó đã xuống 26 rồi,
Every
xuống
day,
56 rồi.
billions of stocks are
Không được.
traded on the New
Không có
York
đàm.
Stock Exchange alone. But
Khạc
with
nó xuống
over
56 rồi.
43,000 companies listed
Thì
on
đánh kiểu gì
stock
cũng không kịp.
exchanges around the world,
Bỏ.
how do investors decide which stocks to buy? To answer this question, it's important to first understand what stocks are and what individuals and institutions
Lâu
hope
sợ.
to achieve by investing in them.
Vẫn một cuộc sở đấy nha
Stocks
sợ.
are partial shares of ownership in a company. So by buying a stock, investors buy a share in the company's success or failure as measured by the company's profits. A stock's price is determined by the number of buyers and sellers trading it. If there are more buyers than sellers, the price will increase, and vice versa. The market price of a share therefore represents what buyers and sellers believe the stock, and by association, the company, is worth. So the price can change dramatically based on whether investors think the company has a high potential for increasing profitability, even if it isn't profitable yet. Investors aim to make money by purchasing stocks whose value will increase over time. Some investors aim simply to grow their money at a faster rate than inflation diminishes its value. Others have a goal of beating the market, which means growing their money at a faster rate than the cumulative performance
1496 à?
of all companies' stocks. This idea of beating the market is a source of debate among investors. In fact, investors break into two main groups over it. Active investors believe it is possible to beat the market by strategically selecting specific stocks and timing their trades, while passive investors believe it isn't usually possible to beat the market and don't subscribe to stock picking. The phrase beating the market usually refers to earning a return on an investment that exceeds the Standard & Poor 500 index. The S&P 500 is a measure of the average performance of 500 of the largest companies in the United States, weighted by company valuation, meaning that companies with a higher market value have a larger effect on the S&P. Again, market value corresponds to what investors believe a company is worth, rather than actual profits. The S&P doesn't directly represent the market as a whole. Many small and mid-range stocks can fluctuate according to different patterns. Still, it's a pretty good proxy for the overall market. It's often said that the stock market behaves like a voting machine in the short term and a weighing machine in the long term, meaning short-term fluctuations in stock prices reflect public opinion, but over the longer term, they do tend to actually reflect companies' profits. Active investors aim to exploit the short-term voting machine aspect of the market. They believe the market contains inefficiencies, that stock prices at any given point in time may overvalue some companies, undervalue others, or fail to reflect developments that will impact the market. Active investors hope to exploit these inefficiencies by buying stocks they think are priced low. To identify undervalued stocks, they may investigate a company's business operations, analyze its financial statements, observe price trends, or use algorithms. Passive investors, by contrast, put their faith in the long-term weighing machine aspect of the market. They believe that even though markets may exhibit inefficiencies at any given point, over time, those inefficiencies balance. So, if they buy a selection of stocks that represents a cross-section of the market, over time, it will grow. This is usually accomplished through index funds, collections of stocks that represent the market. The S&P 500 index is one of the main indexes. The overall goal is the same for all index funds, to hold stocks for the long term and ignore short-term market fluctuations. Ultimately, active and passive investing aren't mutually exclusive. Many investment strategies have elements of each. For example, choosing stocks actively, but holding them for the long term as passive investing advises. Investing is far from an exact science. If there was one foolproof method, everyone would be doing it. Has someone tried to recruit you into a company that seems a little sketchy? Don't ignore the red flags. Check out this video to understand how to identify a pyramid scheme, or further your understanding For millennia, the people of Britain have been using bronze to make tools and weapons and as a trade. But around 800 the value of bronze declined, causing social upheaval and an economic crisis, what we would call a recession today. What causes recessions? This question has long been the subject of heated debate among economists, and for good reason. A recession can be a mild decline, a long-lasting downturn, that complicating matters further, there are countless variables that contribute, making it difficult to continue. So it helps to start with the big picture. Recession, when there is a negative disruption to the balance between supply and demand. There's a mismatch between how many goods people want to buy, how many products and services producers can offer, and the price of the goods and services sold, which prompts an economic decline. An economy's relationship between supply and demand is
lát cái
reflected
nước
in
mà nó
its
không nhận được
inflation
nút
rates
tấn công
and
luôn, nó
interest
nhận thành
rates.
đè.
Inflation happens when goods and services get more expensive. Still, inflation isn't necessarily bad. In fact, a low inflation rate is thought to encourage economic activity, but high inflation that isn't accompanied with high demand can both cause problems for the economy and eventually lead to recession. Interest rates reflect the cost of taking on debt for individuals and companies. The rate is typically an annual percentage of a loan that borrowers pay to their creditors until the loan is repaid. Low interest
Cái
rates
lùm mía
mean that
lát vãi
companies
cả
can
lều.
afford
Đi.
to borrow more money, which they can use to invest in more projects. High interest rates, meanwhile, increase costs
lát
for
vãi lều luôn.
producers and consumers, slowing economic activity. Fluctuations in inflation and interest rates can give us insight into the health of the economy. The most obvious causes are shocks like an earthquake, for example, can destroy the infrastructure needed to produce goods, such as oil. That forces the supply side of the economy to charge more for products that use oil, discouraging demand and potentially causing a recession. But some
Trời má.
recessions occur in times of economic prosperity, possibly even because of economic prosperity. Some economists believe that business activity from a market's expansion can occasionally reach an unsustainable level. For example, corporations and consumers will borrow more than will be added to. But if the economy doesn't grow, more debt than they'll have to redirect funds from other activities, reducing business activity. Psychology can also of a recession can become a self-fulfilling prophecy if it causes people to pull back investing and spending. In response,
What the fuck is
producers
this?
might cut operating costs to help weather the expected decline in demand. That can lead to a vicious cycle as cost cuts eventually lower wages,
Like, what the
leading to even lower demand.
Damn.
Even policy designed to help prevent recessions.
Fuck man, I
When
need to
times are
restart the
tough,
game. It's so freaking
governments
laggy.
and
I
central
can't
banks
do anything
may print
properly.
money, increase spending, and lower central bank interest rates.
It
Smaller
prevents
lenders
me.
can in
It
turn lower
prevents
their
me from
interest
doing
rates,
the
effectively
properly.
making debt cheaper to
Fuck,
boost
it's
spending.
too freaking lag.
But these policies are not sustainable and eventually need to be reversed to prevent excessive inflation. That can cause a recession if people have become too reliant on cheap debt and government stimulus. The Bronze Recession in Britain eventually ended when the adoption of iron helped revolutionize farming and food production. Modern markets are more complex, making today's recessions
Maybe it's the
far
chrome.
more difficult to navigate. But each recession
What the hell? What the? See, this shit is so freaking lag. The fuck? Jesus. No. How do I get more damage? Fuck. Fuck. What the fuck? Bro. It's so freaking lag, man. Not cool, not cool. That's suck. Like, what the fuck is this? Looks like there's no way. There's no way. What the fuck? Please help. Please send help. How the fuck can I survive this? What? Why the hell is 58 already? What the hell? Jesus Christ. You know what? I think I should off stream. Easy. Hello, well. Trời má đét. Này chắc chỉ có off stream mà đánh thôi. Rớt nhanh quá, máy nó không chịu được. Nó rớt FPS liên tục này. Không thể đánh được. Phu hơn nào? Nhầm một không. Set đấy SP là chủ yếu. Căng nhỉ. Không đủ cả đam cơ. Nó hiểu cái gì? What the fuck? I don't fucking need that combo attack. Dead. 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 Nếu hiểu cái gì? Dead. Sủi time. Dead family còn dead cả đam. Dead. Còn không nổi 111k nữa. Mú rồi. Nhìn vậy thôi chứ này mới thứ tư. Uống nước phát xem nào, khát nước thế nhỉ? That family. Ủa, nhầm chứ. Được. Nhưng mà phải có cái gì đấy kích được 25 SP thì ăn được. Nó sợ. Tèm 21k. Hôm nay không có cái nè. Má đét. $700. Má 700 tròn. 701. Trấn cũ ở meta này không ổn tí nào đâu. Kể cả 3S dùng trấn cũ thì cũng thua S thôi. Má đét. Chó giả chiếc chán đời. HOT dùng trấn cũ đang muốn thua cả FR. DPS thua cả FR. Chán lắm. Chó mới chả chiếc.
たの色を。
Cái đấy thì khó. HOF căn bản là nó đã mạnh rồi, nó đã có time stop rồi thì nó trấn mới kiểu gì? Cái con như con HOT nó có trấn mới ấy, là tại vì cái trấn của nó, cái trấn cũ nó đấy quá, cái animation nó dài quá, trấn mới thêm time stop thì nó buff lên được. Bây giờ HOF thì căn bản thì nó đã có time stop rồi, thì không biết là dùng trấn mới nữa thì time stop kiểu gì, buff thêm kiểu gì đâu, buff được kiểu gì nữa đâu. Như con HR ấy, HR thì nó có thể có trấn mới được. Ví dụ như là trấn mới mà giúp nó lúc mà ulti ấy, mà dừng thời gian time stop ấy thì được. Đấy. Chứ còn ở kia thì chơi chứ kiểu gì ta? HOF trấn mới thì không biết là nó buff time stop ở chỗ nào nữa. Rồi trấn mới là chỉ có buff time stop thôi. Hoặc là giờ DA mà ra trấn mới ấy, thì nó ra lúc mà cái phần ballista, phần bắn cung nó time stop được đấy, hoặc là xong rồi là nó xóa thêm cái cooldown Stardust nữa thì được đấy. Chứ giờ mà bảo HOF mà đã có time stop sẵn rồi thì trấn mới này không để làm gì đâu, không biết là một trấn mới kiểu gì, nhưng mà khả năng là rất là thấp, không có. Này cũng đồ gì đây, đã dần chơi quá. Thế thì chưa biết được. Bây giờ time stop là mạnh nhất rồi đấy. Rồi nó phải ra cái trấn gì đấy mà ra trấn mới là điều kiện là phải tăng cái đam lên, xong rồi là rút ngắn thời gian lại. Thì tăng đam thì đơn giản rồi, nó chỉ việc buff lên các chỉ số thôi, nhưng mà làm sao để rút ngắn cái thời gian lại nữa cơ. Sao nhìn nét thế nhỉ? Ôi ăn này sủi, mai đánh. Yeet. Mấy cái đánh nhắc cũng xong rồi. Thôi nay sủi sớm. Tí stream video chat.